if you like a noisy congregation or if you like something quiet and sedate. But when Naomi and I went to the Philippines, we found that there was nothing quiet and almost nothing sedate. When you were in a service, it was noisy. It was noisy in the service. It was noisy with the kids. It was noisy outside the service. It had every kind of loud sort of a vehicle going by and making all kinds of vehicle noises and people honking horns and someone over in another place, because the Filipinos love to share their music, and so they only had one volume setting on any device they had, and it was all the way over completely to the right, and that's the way everything was played. So when they were having worship service, I don't know how many blown transformers and speakers I've seen, but they would crank, and the kids would laugh and shout and run around, and it was chaos, and it was fun. And God's a good God. And as he is coming into Jerusalem, Jesus is coming in as the rightful king of Jerusalem. And the people have gotten so excited about what's happening, and they're not even ready and, thinking about what's going on entirely. They're not like processing this of some sort of a planned event, but they're moving. By the way, the kids, if you've got, so someone's supposed to be doing the kids this morning? Yes. Yes, okay. Perfect. There you go. See, that illustrates it greatly. That's fantastic. Yeah, they don't even understand exactly what they're doing. And Jesus does. He's got these disciples going out, finding a donkey for him, bringing the donkey in the cold, and when they bring this up to him, they start setting this stuff, their coats first, and then they set Jesus on this thing. And if you've ever heard of donkeys, they're not the nicest animal in the world to be riding on. Kind of weird, noisy. I mean, you want the lion, right? You want the lion. Rah! Or the horse, that has that beautiful sound of a horse neighing, and something, a donkey, and he sits on a donkey. Oh my goodness. And there's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords riding on a donkey. And the people are excited. And they start laying their coats out and stripping the branches off of trees. And why would we run around in here? Because, that's what they were doing. Because their Messiah, their King, their Lord, who loved them, who healed them, who raised people from the dead, he was coming into Jerusalem, and they were sure that something wonderful was about to happen. And boy, sure it was. Just not the wonderful they were expecting exactly. But God comes back to Jerusalem. Folks, this is a reversal. You see, several hundred years before, the people of Judea had become so idolatrous and so wicked and so terrible. They had filled the temple of God with idols. They were sacrificing their kids to different idols, Moloch and Asherah and others. They were offering incense to the God of heaven, the Queen of heaven, but not Yahweh, not their God. They were completely spiritually adulterous. And there's a picture in Ezekiel where it has the presence of God leaving Jerusalem and abandoning his people because they had abandoned him and had turned their backs so completely on him. But today, this is the day when God comes back. Woo! And they are thrilled. When Jesus steps in and he goes up, and this is the second time he's done this, where he walks into the temple area, and in that temple area, he turns over the tables of the money changers, and he drives out the people with the doves. And he's doing that because they're cheating them. They're overcharging them, and they're making a ton of money from giving the people the right kind of money to be able to do the sacrifice they were supposed to do. And so they had this money-making operation that was going, and he just tosses it out. The doves were supposed to be for the poorest of the people that had no other way to do something. They could capture a dove and bring it to the temple. But no, they had captured even this one so that even the poorest of the people had to fork up money to pay for a dove, so that they could do the thing that God had wanted them to do. Talk about manipulation of the market. Wow. Forcing everyone who by religious obligation must come in, by the feeling of worship must come in. And that's why Jesus is tossing tables over. Because it's wrong. And truth comes in. It's wrong. He drives out these money table changers. And then we'd seen in chapter 20 where there were two blind men sitting by the side of the road, and Jesus is walking toward Jerusalem, and they start calling out to him and saying, "Jesus, Jesus." And he stops and has them come up, and he says, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And he says, "Lord, that we can see." And he heals them. And they hop up and join the crowd. They're in that crowd that morning. And as they're shouting and waving branches, these guys who couldn't see just a little bit before, and now they can. But as he comes into the temple, it says here that the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. Wow, right there in the temple. These same guys who saw their money tables overturned were watching Jesus with a crowd of people following in, blind, lame, other kind of illnesses, and Jesus is healing them. Right there in the temple. Folks, if you've ever kind of wondered about the temple itself and why it looks like it does, and there's a reason, and that's because God had made the temple for the Israelites to look like the New Jerusalem. It's a place with no death. Now, outside of the Holy of Holies, you had the sacrifice of the animal. And that blood was brought in to the Holy of Holies. But within the Holy of Holies, there's no death. There's no deformity. You couldn't be a priest and have something deformed in your body. You had to be whole and perfect. Why? Because in the New Jerusalem, the new heavens and the new earth, there's no more sickness. There's no more tears. There's no more sorrow. There's no more deformity. Everything is as it should be. And so inside this temple was that way. And so when these people are coming into the temple and Jesus is healing them, he is proclaiming the new heavens, the new earth, and it's right there in front of them. And these priests understood this. They knew what this meant. That someone was healed in the temple meant that the living God was there. The living God, the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. I had a man in Myanmar. Matter of fact, one of the things that gets me thinking about Myanmar so much is that Neil and I spent quite a bit of time there, and teaching pastors, and I got some amazing questions from those pastors. Part of it was I ruined them because in that area, when you're a teacher, you lecture and everyone listens and writes notes and they don't ask questions. And so I taught as an American and started getting questions back. And then I got the guy that was there that was normally teaching. He says, "You've ruined my students." Now he has to answer questions. But that one of the men there was a deep philosopher. He started asking me the nature of truth. And he says, so is truth this? He went through 5 different philosophical definitions of truth. And as he went through those definitions, I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, well, okay, yeah. Except that, you know what? Truth is not
a matter of a proposition or a matter of correspondence or a matter of something that is, able to be demonstrated or verified, or a particular set of words. Jesus said in John, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. You see, truth is a living person. And here comes to these people living truth in front of them. And what a contrast there. And finally in this temple, here come the kids. They've been watching the healing, and they have the right response. Woo! Hosanna to the Son of David! Woo! They're running around. They're making noise. And, wow. Guess what? When the scribes saw the wondrous things he did, and the children crying out in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant. How dare you? How dare you let those kids run around in here? Don't you hear what these are saying? Hosanna to the Son of David. You're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God. You are the promise that we have been expecting. You are the hope that we have set our hearts on. No, you're not. Nah. Jesus says, have you never read? Have you never read? Out of the mouth of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise. Wow. So Jesus is showing them who he is. And they're hearing that. And the noisy kids have a part of that. It's just great. It's just great. And he left from there, and he went out and he did something that was very odd. He goes out to Bethany, he spends overnight, and as he was going by a fig tree, he goes up to the fig tree because he's hungry, and he sees that the fig tree has leaves like shows it's supposed to have some figs on it. And he walks up to the fig tree, and there's no figs at all. It wasn't that it had been harvested, it hadn't produced any. And Jesus says to the fig tree, may no one ever eat figs from you again. He goes on to Bethany. He sleeps overnight. He comes out the next morning. And the next morning, he and his disciples are walking by this fig tree. And the fig tree has withered down to nothing. The disciples are amazed. Wow, how did the fig tree wither so quickly? Jesus says here that, I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt. Now again, faith is not some sort of an energy that we pick up inside ourselves and, we do some sort of a zap like the guys do on the cartoons, and, where we woo-woo in our mind and bring something into creation. Folks, this is trust. This is the ability to hear what God has said and to walk in that pattern. And what had Jesus heard about this fig tree? When he'd seen it, this fig tree that had no fruit but appeared to have something was the exact representation of the nation of Israel at that time, which looked nice on the outside. It had all the marks of something that was a healthy tree, except it didn't really have fruit. And we're going to see this in just a moment, but all these guys have the robes, and they have the temple, and they have the right words to say, and they have the right way to make a sacrifice and to do the sacrifice like they're supposed to. But there's no spiritual fruit. That's what Jesus had seen with the fig tree. He said, truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, it will happen. Whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. You see. Why? If I'm asking for something that God has said to me, David, this is going to happen. It's going to go this way. I can ask God for what he's planning to do. I was talking to Steve earlier, and we were talking about building some stuff and having, a little kid with us helping. And I remember back when I was a kid, and my dad was building something on the back side of the house there. And my dad, I wanted to help, and I had a hammer. I was breaking stuff and tearing stuff up. So he gave me one of those little toys that had the pins, and you can hit them and drive the little wood pin through the hole. And I was sitting there pounding on the wood pins and driving them through the hole and helping my dad, And yeah, it's kind of like that with us, which is to say that God gives us a responsibility, and he gives us a direction, and he gives us a help. And we're busy working on the things that God has given to us. But, we're a lot like the little kids, just pounding on the things. We're getting a little bit done, but he's doing the work. He's getting it done. He's the one that's accomplishing the thing that's here. So why had Jesus seen that kind of a vision? Because here he has to say some hard and truthful and loving words. You see, there's no one that's outside of the opportunity to turn to God. Not even the hardest. And so Jesus comes to these men and he begins to tell them the truth about who he is. When he enters the temple, the chief priests, the elders of the people came up to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority?" They don't really want to know much about his authority. They just wanted to quit. So Jesus asked them about John the Baptist. I'll ask you one question. The baptism of John, where did it come from? From heaven or from man? They discussed it among themselves. If we say from heaven, he'll say to us, "Why did we not believe him?" If we say from man, we're afraid of the crowd. For they all held that John was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." I don't know how many teenagers I've heard the same kind of a reply from. I don't know. It's not that they're ignorant. It's that they don't want to say. And so Jesus gives them two parables. A man had two sons. And he sent one son, he said, "Please go out and work in my vineyard." And the son said, "I'm not going to do it, Dad." He walks off. But later he feels bad about the way he talked to his dad, and he decides he's going to go out, and he just goes and starts working. He knows what to do. Another one, Dad comes up to him and says, "Go help in my vineyard. I need your help today." The young man says, "Sure, Dad, I'll go do it. Sure." So he goes off, and he's away from his dad, and he goes off to his room, and he opens up his iPad, and he starts playing and stuff, and he works on this, he works on that, and he works on that. He never gets out to the vineyard. And Jesus asked him, he says, "Which one of those two young men did the Father's will?" And they said, "Well, the first." He said, "Therefore, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of heaven ahead of you, because they heard John the Baptist, and they listened to him and repented, and you would not." Wow. That's pretty tough. I don't know if you've had people rebuke you in your life, but that's pretty tough. That's pretty straight. And then he goes on to talk about something else. Not just that, these tax collectors who you despise are entering the kingdom of heaven. These prostitutes who you won't even touch or look at are entering the kingdom of heaven, and you're not. He goes on to tell them a story about a farmer. Now, the thing is, every one of these guys would have been wealthy enough to own their own farm. Because, as priests, they were collecting debt from all these people who were paying their debts into the temple. And the reason they were paying debts into the temple was that they figured out a little loophole. You see, if I loaned money to somebody on a regular basis, on an ordinary basis, the loan was only good for 6 years. In the 7th year, I had to forgive it. There was no permanent loan. There was no really long-term loan in Israel. The only exception to this was if money was loaned from the temple, then it had to be repaid to the temple, even though it was longer than 7 years. And so what these guys had done was to turn all their loans that they were making on a business-wise into a gift to the temple, which of course is where they got all their money from and loans from. And so then, they could run the whole place. They would be wealthy and everybody else would be in poverty. Really big manipulation of the system. So when he starts telling this story about a farmer, all these guys are perking up because they all had farms that they were leasing out to tenants, and often these tenants were the people who had previously owned the farm. Here another parable. There was a master of a house who planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug a winepress in it, built a tower, and leased it to tenants, and went to another country. When the season for fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the tenants to get his fruit. And the tenants took his servants and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again, he sent other servants more than the first, and they did the same to them. Finally, he sent his son to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him and have his inheritance." They took him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. When therefore the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? They said to him, "He will put those wretches to a miserable death and let out the vineyard to other tenants who will give him the fruits in their seasons." And Jesus says to them, "Have you never read in the scriptures? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing. It's marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing its fruits." Those tax collectors and prostitutes and sinners. Wow. Wow. Yeah. When we have a feeling of being religious or important, we have a feeling like we're on top of stuff and it all belongs to us, we're probably in a lot of danger. Yeah. And here there's a huge contrast that Matthew draws in this section between simple individuals who saw Jesus, saw what he did, accepted him, and just praised him. And those people who, because of their wealth and power and position, even though they were supposed to be the ministers of God, they rejected him and turned away from him. Today, many people ask, about how's my job going to go? How will my family be supported? Will my spouse be faithful to me? Will my children do something terrible like I hear on the news? Will some stranger harm me like I keep hearing about? What about our country? Will evil people rule our country? A lot of us live in fear that our lives are going to be upside down, turned around and out of control. Sometimes we're angry at other people for stealing from us, and we turn around and we steal from others. I know people that hate liars, and they lie. I've listened to people whose spouse was unfaithful, and they were telling a story about how unfaithful and bad their spouse was, and then telling a story about how they were also unfaithful, but they were still angry at their spouse. Wow. Jesus sees us. He looks deep in our hearts. He is the rightful king. And we should obey him and follow him. He enters Jerusalem with praise and joy because these are the people who have followed him and obeyed him, even though they were also terrible people. But now they've repented. Now they've turned. Now they're listening to him. As we take communion this morning, we're going to take it and ask for you to stay seated today, and we're going to pass it out and then come back. But inside your bulletin, there's a small insert that's there. And as we take communion this morning, there's an opportunity for confession. Are there areas in your life that need the cleansing blood of Jesus? There's a place here for consecration and an opportunity if we've been forgiven. Maybe there's still some area in our life that is not yet 100% belonging to him. And then calling. God calls all Christians. Every Christian participates in the kingdom, in the building up of Christ. And what is God calling you to? And as we take our communion this morning, the word communion means to fellowship with. After we finish our communion today, we're going to immediately go and have a Seder meal, and you're welcome all to join us if you can. We've got plenty of food, too much food. But the communion is a communion with Christ. And salvation is not about me being someplace. Salvation is not about me being in a nice place. Salvation is not about me being comfortable. Salvation is about our ability to walk with God. And that's what those who walk with Jesus into the Jerusalem were saved because, why? Not because they were doing something amazing or fantastic, but just because they're with him. Yeah. Salvation is personal. Truth is personal. Yeah. And so today, as we take communion, everyone is welcome to take this. And whatever it is and wherever you are in your spiritual life, you're welcome to join with us as we walk through these things. I'm going to ask those who are ready for communion to come up, and I believe we're going to have some music as we do this as well. So